Hey guys. This is part 8 of What If Naruto Was Luffy's Sister. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 26, Punk Hazard Eye. At the galley, everyone was enjoying the delicious dinner made by Sanji as they enjoyed each other's company and told some stories of their own adventures. As usual, it was Usopp who started to mention and brag about the things that he did during these past 2 years when they were separated. Leaving out the part where he became fat in just a short time because he ate too much, he told them with a glowing pride of how he trained hard every day as he fought many dangerous creatures that tried to eat him. The rest of the crew smiled as they listened to him, giving him some compliments sometimes. This time, they actually believed him. After all, just look at the sniper's body. No lazy person would be able to achieve such a muscular and healthy body by just watching the sea alone. Even Zoro complimented him, saying that the long nose had grown, and it wasn't just physically, much to Usopp's happiness. Once Usopp was done telling them his story, the rest naturally joined in as they narrated their own adventures, except for Sanji, who refused to share his experiences. Just thinking about those nightmares, his face went dark and he refused to utter even a single word of what he went through in that hell for 2 years. No way! Neru and Robin, who were aware of the blonde's misfortunes, just chuckled as they shared a knowing look with each other. At some point, while the Straw Hats were having a good time, Neru, who was observing them quietly with a gentle smile, couldn't help but to think about her old friends. A sense of nostalgia hit her hard when the interaction between the pirates reminded her of the good old times with her friends. As some memories played inside her head, Neru felt the sense of longing inside her heart. Even though so many years had passed, she still couldn't help but to miss them terribly. Thinking about her precious people, most of them should be over 40 years old by now, and she believed that most of them were probably married and had kids of their own now. Thinking about her precious people, naturally she would also think about her team, both Team 7 and Team Kakashi. She wondered if Kakashi-sensei was ever married in his lifetime, or if Sasuke had finally decided to accept Sakura as his wife. If that wasn't the case, then the Pinkette might have moved on from her old love and decided to find someone else who would love and cherish her like a treasure. No matter how much Neru loved both Sasuke and Sakura, she didn't think that Sasuke, that bastard, was even worthy of Sakura's love and devotion after what he had done. However, that didn't mean that she wished for him to be a single grumpy old man for the rest of his life. After all, he had declared so many times in the past that one of his goals was to restore the Uchiha clan, which meant that he would need to find a woman who was willing to bear his children despite his horrible personality. Anyhow, Neru wasn't that worried over his love life. Knowing Sasuke and how popular he was with the females, he would surely be able to get himself a bride without even needing to be nice. While she was busy reminiscing about her past quietly on her seat, Chopper suddenly called out to her. By the way, Neru? HM? Yes, Chopper? She responded immediately. Can you tell me about your adventures, please? He asked politely with an innocent and cute look that she wasn't able to resist. Yes, Ne-chan. Tell us some stories. Luffy chimed in excitedly. Stories? Usopp joined in. Yo-ho-ho-ho. I wonder what would be the adventures of Neru-san. Seeing that everyone else was looking at her with anticipation and expectation displayed on their faces, Neru gave in and smiled helplessly. All right. What do you guys want to know first? At her words, Usopp raised his hand quicker before anyone could say anything. Tell us about how you go through the reverse mountain, please. The reverse mountain? Neru blinked her eyes twice, before she laughed sheepishly and said, I didn't go through the reverse mountain. Eh? Even the most composed ones like Zoro and Robin were surprised at her revelation. If you didn't go through the reverse mountain, then that means… Wait, don't tell me that you crossed the calm belt or something? Zoro questioned her with a look of disbelief. He remembered when the crew was somehow stuck at the calm belt before they entered the Grand Line, and even someone like him couldn't deny that it was such a scary experience. You're right, Neru admitted. Eh? But how come? That's the nest for the Sea Kings. Nami cried out in surprise. Just like Zoro, she also remembered the time when they ended up at the Calm Belt by accident, and she never wanted to go through that ever again. How did you even manage to get out of that place? Surely your ship wouldn't be able to sail away from the sea since there's no wind and current there, right? Neru smiled in amusement upon seeing their reactions, before saying, I never said that I used a ship to cross over the Calm Belt. While the others were confused, Zoro's one eye lit up with realization. He smirked at her and probed, You used that Kurama, didn't you? Neru nodded. Kurama can swim? Luffy asked while blinking his eyes in confusion at her. Only then did she realize that Luffy never got the chance to actually see Kurama in his true form. Even during the war in Marineford 2 years ago, this brother of hers actually passed out before she could release Kurama upon Blackbeard and his gang. And when Luffy woke up, Kurama had already changed back into his one-tail form and stayed in that form until Luffy left with Rayleigh and Boa Hancock before Neru and her group went back to the New World with Ace and the rest of the Whitebeard pirates. Honestly, she didn't even know if Luffy was actually aware that Kurama was in fact the Kyuubi no Kitsune that she often told him about when he was still a snotty brat. I haven't seen that fox for so long. Luffy suddenly grabbed his chin as he was thinking of something. Then, assuming something, he looked at his big sister with horror and suspicion and said, Nei-chan, don't tell me. Neru raised her eyebrow at him, wondering what it was that this brat was making up now. Don't tell me that you eat him? Neru and the crew just gave him a blank look. With a sweat drop, Neru asked, Do you even know anything about Kurama? Oh yeah. Isn't he the grumpy fox that you brought home from one of your journeys before? I remember that fox. He's the mean fox that always bite me. Then, do you remember the stories of the Bijus that I always told you about? I remember. Luffy nodded his head with a big smile. The stories of the Bijus were always his favorite. Bijus? Robin repeated the foreign word, clearly interested over what was mentioned by the siblings since she never heard of the word Bijou before. Recalling the stories of the Bijus, Luffy was excited to tell his crew about 9 Bijus, which were actually 9 massive creatures with different numbers of tails. He even sang the Bijou song to them. Although he sounded like a dying chicken, he still managed to sing the song correctly. From one-tailed Shikaku to 9-tailed Kurama, he didn't miss even one of them. He even got the stories of them right. Needless to say, Neru was proud and impressed. Wow! That's so cool! Clapper clapped his hands, or hooves, as he stared at Luffy with a pair of starry eyes. Then, the one that we saw at the Fishman Island, was that the Hachibi, Gyuki? No, silly. Luffy laughed at him. That was just Nei-chan's transformation, because she's a ninja. Meme meme. Meme meme. Usopp and Chopper repeated after him, followed by a stance in which they assumed to be what all ninjas in their imagination always do. Neru chuckled and said that was just a transformation, but yes, Gyuki does look like that. Amazing! Then, does this mean that Kurama is truly the legendary Kyuubi no Kitsune? Neru turned her head over to Robin, who asked the question, and pondered over her words. To say that she was surprised to learn about the myth of a 9-tailed fox existing somewhere in this world was an understatement. Since Neru was well aware that she and Kurama were not beings of this world, she knew that when people called Kurama as the Kyuubi, they were referring to the original Kyuubi of this world. To cover Kurama's real identity as a Bijou, Neru didn't bother to clear up the misunderstanding. Kurama, in a sense, also fitted the description of this world's Kyuubi anyway. Although it was said that the other Kyuubi was just a simple myth and legend that were told by people from ancient times, Neru still believed that the 9-tailed fox must be somewhere, hiding itself from the world. After all, if the 9-tailed fox didn't exist, then from where did all the myths and legends come from? So she said, you can say that. Sorry, another Kyuubi, but let us borrow your identity for a while, Neru thought apologetically. While Robin's eyes lightened up, Luffy was confused as he looked between Robin and his big sister, trying to process their words. Huh! What are you guys talking about? Kurama can't be the Kyuubi. He's too small. And he only has 1 tail, while the Kyuubi has 9 tails. The other Straw Hats who were aware that Neru had actually summoned a nine-tailed fox out of her body 2 years ago, and not to mention that the same fox was also able to run across the water surface like it was running on land, could only shake their heads at their clueless captain in a helpless manner. Did he only train and never bothered to find out what had happened to the world? What a typical Luffy, they thought. Luffy, Kurama is indeed the Kyuubi. Only not from here. Neru looked at the others and explained, you see, when we were children, Kurama was always in his one-tailed form. So the kids never actually managed to see Kurama in his full form. Of course, when she mentioned kids, it was referring to Luffy alone. Really? I thought he just had the same name as the Kyuubi in your stories. Then, Nei-chan, where is he? I wanna see him. Luffy expressed his desire by leaning closer to his big sister as he wrapped his stretchy arms around her right arm. It was almost as if he would not let her go if he didn't see the Kyuubi with his own eyes right now. Kurama? Don't even think about it, was the only response that she got. It was a direct rejection, a blatant no. Giving Luffy a helpless look, Neru flicked his forehead with a little bit of force, causing the younger man to yelp in pain and release his hold on her. Ouch. That hurts. Luffy rubbed his forehead and complained in his heart that his Nei-chan was starting to become more and more like Gramps these days. She just kept inflicting pain upon him for no reason. Enough of that. Kurama will show himself to you, if he wants to. Be patient. She scolded him lightly. Luffy only grunted at her words before he focused on his food. Although they didn't continue talking about Kurama, that didn't stop the overly excited Usopp and Chopper from asking more about the Bijus. They were more interested in hearing more about the Bijus than her other adventures. While the others didn't show it on their faces, Neru could still see that they were also interested in learning more about the Bijus. Out of all of them, Robin might be the most eager person after Usopp and Chopper, surprising the rest of the crew when she joined the two in asking Neru about the Bijus' origin, etc. Like the stories told by Luffy earlier, they are the creatures created by an old man with just the power of his own imagination. Neru tried to explain in the simplest way. Or rather, he split the Jubi that he caught into 9 entities that were later known as the 9 Bijus. Listening to what she said, Robin was the most excited. According to you, these Bijus are real, and Kurama is one of them. What exactly is the identity of the old man? What kind of power did he wield that he was even able to create several majestic creatures? Considering how long the Kyuubi has existed, then this old man must have lived a very long time ago. How long was that? 900 years ago? 1,000 years ago? Robin didn't know, and that was what made her excited the most. Her thirst for knowledge and history caused her to be unable to contain the happiness and excitement that she often felt whenever she was about to learn about something new. The rest of the Straw Hats were amused to see Robin like this. They had never seen her this excited before. Meanwhile, Neru was starting to think whether telling them about the Bijus and old man Rakuto Sinin was a mistake. How was she supposed to explain that the other 8 and the powerful old man she told them about only existed in her previous world and not in this world? If she agreed with Robin's words, wouldn't it mean that she was creating a false history? Neru didn't even know much about this world's history. What if she said something wrong that might cause a problem in the future? However, after taking into consideration that this was her own brother's crew anyway, then it shouldn't be a problem. Right? Yes. She ended up admitting. Then, is Kurama older than the world? Robin suddenly stood up and slammed her hands on the surface of the table, startling everyone. She just couldn't help it. She was just too excited. Suddenly, Neru felt that she might have said the wrong thing. Including this year, there were exactly 1,524 years since the people of this world started to use the Kainrenki calendar, which is also known as the Age of Heaven. Saying that old man Rakuto and Kurama were older than the world itself was not wrong, but they didn't know the truth of the matter. In Robin's eyes, Kurama could be considered to be a treasure that knew about the world than anyone else. Maybe he even had a clear answer for what happened during the Void Century. As if knowing what the older woman was thinking about, Neru immediately said, "Don't even think of asking that fox about world affairs. Kurama is not the type to get involved in something that doesn't concern him, and the other Bijus. They don't usually mingle with humans as most of them prefer solitude. So I'm afraid that you will not be able to get your answer from him. Whether she believed in her words or not, Robin nodded in understanding and sat back on her seat. Seeing the slight flicker in her eyes, Neru felt somewhat guilty. But who told her to say something that could mislead others, huh? But when she thought about it again, she wasn't wrong either. They might not exist here, but they still existed in another world. Plus, it wasn't like anyone had the knowledge of the 9 Bijus other than her brothers, and the Straw Hats anyway. Feeling confident, Neru let herself to enjoy the rest of her meal in peace. She didn't know where she was. She didn't even know how she got here. But if she was asked, she knew that the world that she was in right now was not her reality. Because she had been here not once, not twice, but multiple times already. This was the dreamland that she was forced into, a world that served no purpose, as she knew that once she woke up, everything would be forgotten. Just like her previous dreams, this time, she still couldn't talk nor could she move her body as she wished. All she could do was to stand in the middle of this vast grassland like a statue. The weather here was sunny, as it had always been. The sky was painted with a nice shade of blue, like her eyes. She could feel the familiar feeling of the grass beneath her bared feet, and the soft, gentle breeze of wind that brushed against her cheeks, causing her hair to sway lazily along with the wind. No matter how nice the weather was, she thought that such good weather didn't fit the emotions that she was currently feeling at the moment. Numb. Helpless. Desperation. All of those feelings combined, making her heart feel restless. She just knew that later, she would see the same old scene all over again. Only for it to be forgotten once she returned back to reality. Unsurprisingly to her, the blue sky suddenly turned into the familiar depressing grayish color, and she could also feel the soft grass beneath her feet withering in just a blink. As always, she thought, she wasn't even surprised by the drastic changes. Seeing that everything around her turned dull and depressing, it was as though someone nasty was sucking out the life and energy of Mother Nature, and slowly killing it. Without her consent, her body turned around and there, she saw the same man and woman that seemed unfamiliar but at the same time, gave her the odd feeling of familiarity. They were sitting underneath the same giant tree, and as usual, the man had his back against the tree as he held onto the dying woman in his embrace. As though she was a puppet being played by some strings controlling her limbs, she made her way towards them. 1 step. 2 steps. 3 steps. It wasn't until her body arrived a couple of steps away from them, did her legs stop walking. Then her eyes fell onto the woman. The woman looked up, and their eyes met. Despite the negative emotions that she was feeling, her blue eyes were full of life, unlike the woman whose eyes were dull and seemed to be dazed as the two women continued to stare at each other in silence. Unlike the woman, the man didn't seem to notice that there was another person standing near them. He just continued to treat her like a phantom while continuing to stare at the woman in his embrace. It was like he would never notice that someone else was there, doing nothing but standing and staring at them. Like a creep, she thought to herself. The woman then slowly attempted to reach out her hand towards the lingering ghost that only she could see, but strength seemed to leave her body as her hand suddenly fell to her side. A few seconds later, the man then placed his thumb on the woman's forehead. "Live well," he said with a firm but soft voice. And suddenly, the man and women crumbled into dust as the world faded away. Next thing she knew, the scene changed and she was now standing somewhere between the land and the sea. In front of her was another couple of people, and all she could see was their backs. But this time, it was a young woman and an elderly woman who sat next to each other as they enjoyed the view of the sun that was slowly descending into the horizon. The elderly woman, who was previously sitting with a straight back, suddenly leaned against the much younger woman's side. "I lived a wonderful life. You should do the same," the elderly woman said softly. Soon after that, the ground beneath them crumbled as the world broke into thousands of pieces. Neru then screamed as she fell into the pit of darkness underneath her. When Neru woke up from her slumber, her face was devoid of any emotion. Despite the turmoil in her heart, she was unexpectedly calm as this time, she didn't wake up gasping for air like how she did when she first started to experience bizarre dreams whenever she went to sleep. Without making any sound, she got into a sitting position on the bed. She looked around the room and noticed that she was all alone inside the girls' quarter room. It took her a while to recall that after the meals, she suddenly felt the desire to sleep and decided to take a short nap. Using her chakra, she sensed 9 familiar presences all gathered together at one place, which she immediately figured out was the galley. Based on the harsh rocking of the ship, and the faded thunderous sound from outside, she assumed that perhaps the crew had just gone through a stormy situation. Perhaps. She didn't know. She wasn't sure. Because she was fucking asleep when the others were dealing with some shits. She was such an irresponsible person, she thought. Knowing that she was being cranky because she was getting affected by her stupid dream once again, Neru grew irritated at herself for being sensitive. It had always been like this ever since not too long ago. These days, she was suffering from a lack of sleep. Every time she went to sleep, she would be having some weird dreams that would wake her up earlier than what her body used to. Suffering from a bad dream should be a small matter, right? But what she experienced was not just the inability to fall asleep again once she woke up, and she would also feel the exact same feelings and emotions that she felt in her dream world. Which totally sucks because then she would be all moody and sensitive, just like how she was feeling at the moment. And she couldn't even recall what she dreamt about for most of it. Not only could she not remember the details of her somewhat depressing dreams, but she just had to be affected by them too. Needless to say, Neru was annoyed. Sighing aggressively, she hoped that this situation would end soon. She didn't want to implicate some innocent people just because she was in a bad mood. Nobody deserved to be treated like shit just because she failed to control her emotions well. After a few moments trying to recall her dreams and failing, she clicked her tongue in annoyance. This couldn't be continued, she thought. She had to do something to distract herself. Making a quick decision, Neru took out her Den Mushi and quickly dialed a familiar number. Kachak. Yuzu? Oh-ho? If this isn't Leader-san. Yuzu's familiar voice answered the call. Not that I am unhappy that you're giving me a call now, but Leader-san, I thought you said that you would contact me only if you are about to arrive here. HM? Don't tell me that you and those straw hats are actually about to arrive? Is that it? Because if you are, then I'm hoping that you wouldn't take that stupid man along. They both knew which stupid man the swordswoman was referring to. Amusement flashed across her eyes when she listened to Yuzu's words of disdain over a certain man. Actually, you're right. Depending on our situation, our arrival shall be either later today or tomorrow. That's sooner than I expected, Yuzu said. I guess your little brother will be very happy to hear this news. After all, the tournament will be held tomorrow. Surely, he wants his big sis to watch him beating up everyone and be the last man standing. Fufufu. Since it's Ace, there's nothing for me to be worried about. He will be just fine. As the older sister, of course she knew more than anyone else of her brother's strength. Combining his devil fruit abilities, his haki, and also the training that he went through under her care, now she could say with confidence that Ace was not the same Ace who was still aggrieved over Whitebird's death. Anyway, what about the princess that you told me before? We didn't meet again. Before Neru and the Straw Hats left Fishman Island, she had received a report from Yuzu of an interesting encounter with Viola, who was the former princess of Dressrosa's previous reigning monarchs. Currently, she was under the identity of Violet and one of Doflamingo's people. Now, why would someone like her suddenly show up in front of dangerous people like Yuzu and Ace? According to Yuzu, it seemed that this Miss Violet was not very fond of her current situation, as she was actually brazen enough to harbor the thought of going against Doflamingo, her king and also the captain of the Don Quixote pirates. I still think that there's something wrong with her brain. I don't know why she even dared to think that you would be interested in her stupid idea. She just wants to use your power to execute her enemies who caused the downfall of her family. There was nothing much that Neru knew about Dressrosa and Doflamingo. She went to the Grand Line when she was 12, and spent the next 4 years exploring the first half of the Grand Line with Yuzu and Hyde. By the time the trio entered the New World, Doflamingo had already been crowned as the current ruler of Dressrosa in the year of 1514. Even though Yuzu was the first friend that she had made after entering the Grand Line, Neru was not a busybody over someone else's personal life, especially when Yuzu herself had rarely talked about her past and had only given some vague words of her background. Which was also a sign to Neru that the brunette wasn't fond of talking of the life that she had before they met each other. Neru and Hyde only knew about her being from Mary Geos when the three of them were reading an article about the newly crowned king of Dressrosa, and at that moment, Yuzu had unexpectedly blurted out the fact that Doflamingo was actually her older cousin. But even then, their friendship remained the same, as no matter what kind of life Yuzu had before she met them, she was still their friend. And although Yuzu and Doflamingo were cousins, the age gap between them was too big, and Doflamingo's family had long left Mary Geos even before Yuzu was born. She had heard a lot of stories from her parents and her clansmen about her uncle taking away his family to live a humble life outside of Mary Geos. But something happened that caused her older cousin to kill his own father after 2 years of the death of his mother. The first meeting between Yuzu and Doflamingo was when she was 11, and that was when she had just returned back to the household, only to witness the cold bodies of her parents and the servants gathered in the middle of the living room with Doflamingo sitting on the family's head seat with a bloody grin. She was supposed to be killed alongside everyone else on that day, but it was unknown what changed Doflamingo's mind that he actually decided to spare her little life. Fast forward to 11 years later, Yuzu was no longer the powerless little girl from Mary Geos. She was now General Yuzu from the Whirlpool Empire. While I still think that this person is not that smart, she is still an interesting person. Fufufu, therefore Leader-san, since you're going to be here anyway, aren't you interested to at least listen to what she has to say? HM? Neru raised her eyebrow at the grinning snail. Why does it seem to me that you're the one who is interested in this Miss Violet? Leader-san is right. Yuzu didn't deny her words. However, there are also some good things if you are willing to listen to what she has to say. Oh ho? Now you're getting me curious about her. Is there something that you haven't told me about? Just know that I will never bring harm to you, my leader. Once she was sure that her emotions were stable, she then left the girls' quarter room, and the first thing that she noticed was the sight of a burning island not far from the ship. With a blank look, Neru stared at the island for a good moment before she retracted her gaze away from it and made her way to the galley. Before she could even reach the stairs that led to the second floor, she already heard loud noises of some people screaming and yelling coming from inside the galley. Quietly standing at the door, she arrived just in time to see Luffy speaking loudly to a crying Den Mushi that suddenly coughed up blood as the caller claimed to be stabbed by someone, scaring away the cowardly members of the crew. Luffy! This is a real problem. He just said that he got stabbed. That guy just got killed while talking to us. Usopp screamed in horror with Chopper and Nami. Ignoring the panicking trio, the relaxed Zoro was about to ask something to Brook when he noticed a certain someone staring at them as she leaned the side of her body against the doorframe with her arms crossed. Zoro had to admit that he was surprised to see her, as he failed to notice her presence until he actually saw her. Neru. He called out to her, which brought everyone's attention to her instantly. Neru nodded at them before heading towards the green-haired man and sat next to him. Neru-san. Did these idiots wake you up with their loud voices? Here, have a cup of tea first while I prepare dinner for the three of you beautiful ladies, said Sanji as he served her a warm cup of tea. Neru thanked him with a sweet smile, causing the happy man to swoon over her. I'm sorry I overslept. I guess I was just too tired that I failed to realize the situation that you guys were going through. Neru looked at some of the who were drenched. It seemed that she was right to assume that they had just gone through a stormy situation when she was asleep. Seeing that she was feeling guilty, the others immediately assured her that they were fine and everything was okay. They were aware that she was feeling a little bit unwell, and Sanji had also told them not to disturb her rest. Nei-chan, Luffy called out to her. Did you know what just happened? I heard someone just died, she answered bluntly. Luffy nodded his head eagerly. Someone just got stabbed. Apparently, a samurai is going around attacking some people in Bang Hazard. It's Punk Hazard, Usopp corrected him. That's what I said. Shameless Luffy responded back. Neru just calmly sipped her tea while the others stared at her, waiting for her to comment on whatever just happened. A few moments later, she looked at her brother. A samurai, you said? Interesting. You know what is that? That samurai thing? Neru glanced at the curious and interested Zoro and nodded. Samurai is what a swordsman is called in the land of Wano. Unlike your usual sword users here, the samurais there have their own codes of honor or something that is related to their principles and pride. Being a samurai means that you have a high status among the people, and most of them are samurai themselves. Besides samurais, some of them are ninjas as well. Oh. I have also heard that the samurais in Wano are apparently so strong that not even the marines are brave enough to go anywhere near the country. The people of Wano do not bother with the outside world, and the country itself is not affiliated with the world government. Brook joined in, adding what little information that he knew based on what he heard years ago. Neru confirmed Brook's claims by giving her own 2 cents of what she knew. Although Wano was a country that practiced isolationism pretty well, the country still fell under the control of a Yonko named Kaido, who was also the captain of the Beast Pirates. With even Kaido's name being mentioned, the crew now had the basic idea of how powerful this country called Wano truly was. Some of the Straw Hats yelped in horror upon hearing Kaido's name, while the rest praised both Neru and Brook for their knowledge. Zoro in particular seemed very interested in this samurai and the country itself. When Neru noticed that Zoro was interested, she further said, if you must know, old man Kozaburo was once a Wano citizen. He was also the one who crafted your Wado Ikimonji. I heard that he also has another sword, but unfortunately he left it there before he left. Now that Neru mentioned the old man, Zoro remembered him. Really? I didn't expect that. He told me that he left the country when he was still in his prime, so he doesn't know much about the current Wano. Zoro nodded in understanding. Then, Luffy suddenly went to her side and asked Nei-chan, what do you think we should do now? Neru blinked her eyes at him. In the background, she could see both Usopp and Nami were staring at her with a pleading look. Amused, she then returned her attention to Luffy. Why are you even asking me? 'Cause you're the big sis. Of course I have to listen to you. Luffy answered naturally. For him, although they were not children anymore, Luffy still had the habit of listening and asking for his older sister's words of advice. You were not this obedient when Ace talked to you. Ace is Ace, Nei-chan is Nei-chan. Though she was amused, she was also quite helpless. Shaking her head, she said to him, Luffy, this ship is yours, and the captain is you. I am just a mere passenger hitching a ride on a pirate ship. Which translated to yes, sure. You can do whatever you want. Luffy blinked his eyes a couple of times, before he was hit with a sense of understanding. He grinned brightly at her as Nami and Usopp sighed, accepting the fate decided by their willful captain, while the rest just either grinned or smirked after hearing Neru's words. While she could easily influence Luffy to obey her words, she was also aware of her role on this ship. It didn't matter if she was Luffy's older sibling, but as the captain of this ship, it would be absurd if he even needed to listen to an outsider in order for him to make a decision on his own ship. Her response was a good response because she actually respected Luffy's identity and position as the captain of this pirate ship. She didn't treat him like a child, nor did she consider herself to be the one in control despite her honorary status as an empress of a kingdom. That was another trait of hers that deserved to be respected. But shouldn't we head to Dressrosa as soon as possible? Usopp suddenly asked. Would it be okay if we are late for the tournament? It's fine. We are not that far away from Dressrosa, so we will still be able to arrive just in time for the tournament, she assured them. Naturally, they believed in her words. Luffy was pumped with energy and excitement. Yosh! Guys, our first island in the New World. Is Punk Hazard? Yeah. After the others were done cheering, Neru provided them with some info regarding Punk Hazard. She explained that this Punk Hazard was originally a military base of the world government. However, a gas explosion suddenly happened, which caused the whole place to be completely abandoned and shut down. Since nobody was supposed to be here, Akainu and Akiji had settled on that place as their battleground that would determine which one of them would replace Sengoku as the new fleet admiral, which was later won by Akainu. The fierce battle between the two admirals caused the climate of the island to change permanently. The burning island that we're seeing right now is the side that is affected by Akaini's devil fruit, while the other side is completely cold and snowy thanks to Akiji's devil fruit. Everyone was surprised at what she had just exposed. Who would have thought that the story would be like this? Just those two are capable of causing that. Scary Usopp cried out. He absolutely wanted to avoid facing that kind of monster in the future. Then, would there be Marines? Nami asked. Shouldn't be, Neru answered. Why? I thought this place was a military base. When the gas explosion happened, the culprit managed to clean up that place. Supposedly there should be some poisonous gas there, but the guy managed to purify everything. Wait, so that means… Neru grinned slightly at the knowing look of Robin and said there is a high chance that the culprit is still there, which means that we are bound to see him and his men if we are going to explore the island. The man that called you guys earlier could be one of his men too, you know? Nami and Usopp gulped down their nervousness, having a bad feeling about the whole thing. Is that guy extremely dangerous? That guy, Caesar Clown, is an important ally of Shichibukai Doflamingo. So yes, he can be considered dangerous since there's a Shichibukai acting as his shield. Neru looked at the crew and couldn't help but to give them some warnings. While I know that you guys are strong, remember that behind Caesar is a Shichibukai. If the one responsible for the distress call is indeed someone in trouble and not just a trap to lure you guys there, then you guys should be quick to find and save him. Remember, try to keep a low profile as long as you can because once they are aware of our presence, then they will surely attack us. The crew split into two groups with one group staying back at the ship to take care of Sunny while the other group would explore the island and try to locate the person who was responsible for the emergency call earlier. You sure you don't want to come with us? Zoro asked Neru, who stood next to him. Luffy, Usopp and Robin had already settled themselves inside the mini-going Merry, ready to go. Except for the pale-faced Usopp, who was forced to go with the group due to his unluckiness. Including Zoro, the four of them were chosen through a lucky draw earlier as the team that would head over to the island. It was done so because most of them wished to go and almost none of them, except for a certain trio, wanted to stay behind to guard the ship. Sadly for a certain sniper, he was chosen even though he didn't even have the slightest desire to leave the ship. Yeah. Nei-chan, let's go together. Luffy waved at her excitedly. The bento that Sanji had given him had already been opened and half of the food had already ended up in his stomach. It's fine. The four of you can just go and enjoy yourselves, Neru said. Plus, there isn't enough space for me to sit there, you know? Hearing what she said, Usopp tearfully stared at her with a hopeful gaze and said, Wani-sama. Here. You can sit in my place, you can even replace me if you wanted to. I honestly don't mind. Ma Usopp, you won the lucky draw, remember? If you don't go, you'll miss the fun adventure. Shishishishi. Look at that. Usopp pointed a finger at the island and screamed, which part of that burning island looks fun to you? Shishishishi. It's a burning island, Usopp. Luffy simply responded, as if that would explain why said island was fun to him. In response, Usopp just slumped in his seat helplessly. I give up. While Usopp was lamenting over his fate, the others just looked at them with amusement. Well then, we're off, Zoro announced before jumping off the ship and landed on his seat in the mini-going Merry, which was next to a smiling Robin. Underneath the mini-going Merry, there was a long trail of clouds, made by Nami so that the group could cross over the sea of fire and reach the burning island easily. The others were impressed with her newfound ability, wondering what else she could do. Now that everything was settled, the others on the Thousand Sunny watched as the mini-going Merry started to move. Remember, always be careful and never let your guard down. Who knows, you guys might encounter some dangerous things or that samurai soon, Neru said calmly, causing Usopp to be even more dejected. Also, if you guys can, try not to bring too much attention to yourselves. Yash! Let's go! Somebody! Please! Trade with me! Usopp cried out for one last time. Hang in there, Usopp! Nami cheered him up as she waved her hand. Yo-ho-ho! Be safe, everyone. Good luck. We'll follow after you guys later. When the Mini Mary was already far enough, Chopper groaned. Ugh, I'm so glad that it wasn't me who had to go there. I'll never be able to survive with the heat. The poor reindeer was already drenched with his own sweat. It wasn't just him who was sweating. Since they were quite near the burning island, and not to mention that there was literally a sea of fire between them and the island, it was unavoidable for them to feel the burning heat. Since it was too hot, Nami had already changed out of her previous outfit, and was now wearing a bikini top and long jeans with her hair tied into a high ponytail, much to Sanji's delight, since the orange-haired woman looked extremely beautiful and sexy like this. Well then, I'm going ahead now, Neru suddenly said. Are you sure you don't want me to accompany you, Neru-san? Sanji asked with concern. What if the evil men of Caesar Clowns suddenly show up and scare you? Instead of Neru responding, it was Nami who rolled her eyes as she sighed and said, Sanji-kun, are you doubting Neru-san's strength? You do know that she alone is a lot stronger than those four combined, right? Anyway, I don't think you can do much to help her either. Nami Swan. I love it when you're being harsh to me. Neru just chuckled in amusement before saying, Nami is right. I appreciate your concern, Sanji-kun, but I'll be just fine. Then, under the watchful eyes of the others, Neru jumped off the ship and landed steadily on the water surface. Despite the small waves, it didn't affect her balance at all. Although they had seen Brook running across the water surface thanks to his speed and his light body, Neru on the other hand didn't even do anything other than standing still. They were all impressed by just the sight of her standing on the water surface and not falling into the sea. Well then, see you guys later, she said, and before anyone could say anything, she already left. At the same time, at an unknown place. In that place where there was not even a speck light, a small boy was sitting on the cold floor with his back against the wall. Around him, there were many scattered items that could easily be identified as trash and junk. Despite the unpleasant smell, the boy didn't let it bother him at all. Hugging his knees closer to his chest, the boy then placed his forehead on top of them when his stomach suddenly released a growling sound. He gritted his teeth as he tried to suppress his hunger, and the pain that he felt for not having eaten and drank anything for these past few days. Trying to hold on to whatever strength that he had left, he tried his best to stay awake and ignore the urge to close his eyes. He was afraid that if he were to close his eyes now, he wouldn't be able to open them again. And if that were to happen, he would never be able to see the others or even fulfill what he was supposed to do. When he imagined that, he suddenly felt like crying. But no! He couldn't afford to let his tears fall just because he was feeling all sad and helpless. Taking a few deep breaths, he suddenly changed his posture into a kneeling position as he placed his hands together and prayed with a sincere heart. He prayed to the existing Kami-sama that everyone would be okay. He prayed for his precious people. He prayed for his country. And he prayed for his parents to rest in peace and to not worry about him. Because he would definitely carry on the will of flame of his clan and the pride of a samurai on his shoulders to free his country from the evildoers. Chapter 27, Punk Hazard 2. After she left the Thousand Sunny, Neru wasted not even a single second as she ran across the sea until she eventually reached the other side of Punk Hazard. With her excellent speed, it didn't take long for her to arrive, and as soon as her feet landed on the snowy ground, several thoughts came across her mind at once. Inwardly, she sighed as Luffy's decision to come to this island had more or less sealed her fate for the next couple of days. She recounted back about what Yuzu had reported to her before. According to what Yuzu had said to her, this Viola person was actually brazen enough to harbor a treacherous thought of betraying her king. Not only that, but she was also daring enough to seek out Ace and Yuzu, knowing that they were one of her closest people, just to request for her to aid the former princess in her rebellious plan. No matter how brave Viola was, Neru didn't think that someone would be daring enough to rebel against the current monarch of her kingdom without a solid plan and a backup. The former princess must have her own army if she was thinking of going against Doflamingo. After all, just based on Yuzu's words, it didn't seem that this Viola was acting based on an impulsive decision alone. In all honesty, Neru's impression of Viola was not that good after hearing that she was planning to rebel, and was even trying to drag her into this muddy water. No matter what reason that might lead to Viola to decide to go against Doflamingo, she still shouldn't have sought out another ruler of a kingdom who had nothing to do with the Shichibukai or the country that he was reigning over at all. Neru was also a lord of her own kingdom, and as a ruler, she absolutely loathed the mere thought of her own citizens planning to betray her. Viola's action of seeking her out, wasn't her intention already that obvious? She was just trying to use the power of another person to deal with her enemy. One of the things that Neru detested the most was when someone was planning to use her. Therefore, she never thought of agreeing with Viola's absurd request. But then, fate decided the opposite of what she wanted. Thinking of how this place was the territory of a certain mad scientist, and said mad scientist was also connected to a certain tyrant due to their business partnership that had something to do with a certain Yonko, and not to mention that even her brother and his crew were willing to be here despite her warning of a possible danger. She had this feeling that they would not be leaving this feeling without any trouble anytime soon. Since this was an enemy territory, she didn't wish to attract trouble as soon as they were here. But after considering that her brother's presence was just too strong that he would definitely attract some troubles anyway, she ended up resigning herself to fate and let Luffy to do as he liked, since she knew that trying to lay low would be almost impossible anyway. Hence why she let them wander around the burning island that had nothing there, while she alone went to the other side of the island where she knew the main base was supposed to be located at. In other words, she was merely using her brother and his friends as a form of distraction, while she herself went to do her own things alone. If they were destined to be discovered anyway, they might as well just split up and let her handle the other matter. What other matter, you might be asking? Of course it had something to do with that Caesar clown. Now that she was already here, there was simply no way for her to get out of this situation. And according to what Luffy had said on the ship earlier, there was already a troublesome situation happening on this island before they were even here. It also didn't help that the brat Luffy was more than willing to get dragged into that troublesome situation as well. She wasn't sure if Caesar Clown had anything to do with the killing of those unfortunate people, but if he did, then he might have already expected that the Straw Hat crew was coming here. Which also meant that she should be expecting the enemies to come knocking on their door anytime soon. Therefore, instead of wasting time, she might as well just get it over with and find the final boss of this level as quickly as she could before the situation could get out of hand. It would be good if she managed to find that man before her presence was exposed. Only then would she be able to decide whether to go on with the plan that she had in her head or not. With her head full of thoughts that only she knew, Neru continued to look around the place. Depending on her sensory abilities that she had honed ever since she was born, she managed to avoid some presences that she believed to be the people that were working for Caesar. And by the looks of it, they were patrolling around the area, looking for something. What else would it be other than looking for them, the intruders? It was good to say that her ability to sense presence was quite good, especially when she had decades to train herself. Making good uses of her ability, she eventually found a big building that she had been looking for while avoiding the people here. This should be it, she muttered, looking at the building in front of her. Without any hint of hesitation, she pushed open the large door and proceeded to enter the facility, as if she owned the damn place. Once the door was closed, she brushed off the remaining snow on her person before looking around the place carefully. It wasn't until she was sure that there was nobody else around the area that she started to move. Avoiding the eyes of the surveillance snails on the wall was not a difficult task for someone like her. Based on how tall the building from outside, she wasn't surprised to discover 3 floors here. As she wasn't here for a tour, it didn't take long for her to be done with inspecting the first and second floor. In a short time, she was already on her way to the 3rd floor. Abruptly, as soon as she arrived on the 3rd floor, her expression changed slightly when she sensed a familiar but foreign presence somewhere on this floor. Immediately, a wave of memories of a certain old man resurfaced in her head. Even though it was such a long time ago, she still remembered the feeling of Ryo of Old Man Kozaburo, which held the same kind of presence as chakra that she hadn't felt ever since she had been reborn into this world. As she had already come to terms with the fact that chakra didn't exist here, but Ryo did, It didn't take long for her to recover from her shock. Knowing that there was supposed to be a samurai from Wano on this island, she wondered if the person possessing such a large amount of chakra-like energy here was the same samurai from Wano. After all, old man Kozaburo did say that only the people of Wano possessed Ryo. So it wasn't wrong for her to assume that the samurai was the owner of this strong presence. Curious and cautious, she followed the presence, and was eventually brought to the front of a closed room. With her sharp sense of hearing, she could hear a grumble of someone from within the room. "Is there anyone outside? I demand to be released this instant. Just wait until I manage to get out and have my body back. I will definitely cut off all of you bastards one by one." Those were the words that she heard before she decided to open the door to meet the person that seemed to be kept here as a poor captive rather than being a subordinate of Caesar Clown. When she opened the door by blasting the door open with her palm, she expected to see a man, since the voice that she heard obviously belonged to that of a male. However, she didn't expect to see several pieces of flesh with eyes, nose, ears and mouth scattered on the floor instead. Based on how they were divided, they were obviously cut into pieces by a sharp weapon. Supposedly, a knife or a sword. She blinked. The eyes staring at her also blinked. Two pairs of eyes stared at each other. One was calm without any ripple of emotion, while the other one had the unconcealed surprise, a little bit of delight, and also wariness shown in them. Not caring about the little bit of awkwardness, Neru channeled a Kakashi-sensei and gave the other person an eye smile. "Hello there. You." Seeing that the person standing between the broken door was just a young lady, wasn't what made him feel speechless. Instead, it was the fact that this young lady was wearing clothes similar to the clothes worn by the people in his land. Perhaps his mind had subconsciously thought that this young lady was a fellow countryman, therefore, the wariness and cautiousness that he originally had against her had completely disappeared. "Young lady, please lend me a hand," he begged. If lowering his dignity as a proud warrior of his country could give him the freedom that he was desperate for at this moment, then he was more than willing to lower his pride and beg another person for it. After all, he wasn't doing this just for himself. Neru stared at those eyes full of desperation, and didn't react for a while. In the end, she unhurriedly crouched down and started to grab the fleshes one by one, rearranging them according to her feelings. Seeing that she was willing to help him, the man was delighted. "Young lady, I express to you my utmost sincerity for your help." "No problem," she responded back with a smile. Once she was down, she took a good look at the head that was twice as big as her own and noted the topknot above his head. "You're from Wano, aren't you?" Neru had been to Wano once, so it was expected for her to have seen the traditional hairstyle adorned by the local people that differentiated them from the people of the outside world. Seeing that this man had the same topknot on his head, he must be from Wano. Which also meant that he could be either the samurai that had been killing people on this island, or a companion of that samurai. The samurai widened his eyes in surprise, but not much. Her whole attire and appearance itself screamed that she was a fellow countryman, so it wasn't a surprising matter for her to recognize him as someone from their own land. Naturally, Neru knew what he was thinking about. The expectation shown in his eyes was too obvious for her to ignore. After all, this wasn't the first time she had been misunderstood as a person from that particular country. Since she had the habit of concealing her presence, this man surely wouldn't be able to detect her chakra. So she could only assume that his misunderstanding came from the way she dressed. "I am not from Wano if that is what you're thinking about. But I have been there once several years ago. I am assuming you're from there based on your hairstyle and the way you speak." This time, the man was truly surprised. This young lady was not a fellow countryman but instead, an outsider who had been to Wano once. "You're not from Wano?" "I'm from Yuzu. I have never heard of that place before." Considering Wano's state of isolationism, it wasn't surprising for him to not know of a newly established country such as the Whirlpool Empire. "Well, I'm not surprised you haven't heard of it since it is still considered to be a newly built country." "So it's a new country." He nodded. "My name is Neru." She suddenly introduced herself. Since the young lady had given her name, the man naturally returned the courtesy by introducing himself back. The name given is Kinemon. It is a great blessing for me to have met you, Neru-san. Likewise. She gave him a polite smile before going straight to the point. By the way, were you the wanted samurai who went around cutting and slashing the people of this place earlier? It is indeed I, Kinemon. He admitted immediately without any hint of remorse for what he had done. Not that she cared. Instead, she went to explain about the distress call the crew had gotten earlier of how there was a scary evil samurai that went around attacking and killing people on this island, hence why they were here to help the people in trouble. Hearing her words, Kinemon was infuriated and immediately explained his part of the story and his own circumstances. While it was true that he was indeed the samurai that had attacked the people earlier, but that was only because they were standing in his way from rescuing his son, who had been taken to this place. Not sensing any hint of him lying, Neru knew that he was being truthful. Even the worry and anxiousness that she could see in his eyes were genuine emotions that couldn't be faked. A person who could display such fragile emotions to a stranger he just met was simply an honest man. Plus, she believed that the people that he had attacked earlier were Caesar's subordinates. Then, how did you end up like this, Kinemon-san? She asked with curiosity, inwardly feeling impressed that someone actually had the ability to behead people without actually killing them. And it was such a clean cut too, with not even a single drop of blood. At her question, Kinemon's expression turned grim as he resentfully said, a man came out of nowhere and suddenly cut me into 3 parts. He didn't know what happened to his body, but cutting him was not enough, even his head was cut into several pieces. He was annoyed at his situation, but he was also angry and upset at himself for allowing such humiliation to befallen him. If it wasn't for his carelessness that let his guard down, how could he end up in this pathetic state? Not to mention that this was a disgrace to his pride and dignity as a proud samurai. But who knew what poor Momonosuke had gone through, the more he, Kinemon, was in this room with no ability to move? Without his legs, he couldn't move. Without his arms, he couldn't use his sword. He was thoroughly useless. How would he be able to search for Momonosuke in this pathetic state? Suddenly, a thought came across his mind. Looking up, he stared at the young lady in front of him. Before his brain could process anything, the words had already flowed out of his mouth. Young lady, please lend me your help once more. Sure. Eh? Kinemon blinked. Her fast reply rendered him speechless. She didn't even blink before agreeing just like that. She didn't even ask for the details. Really? He asked once again, trying to make sure that he didn't hear it wrongly. Yeah, sure. I'm here to find a certain man anyway, so I might as well just help you to look for your son while I'm at it, she said. If finding Caesar was an easy task for her, then finding a missing boy was even easier. As long as the boy was somewhere on this island, Neru was confident that she could find him. Her words and kindness to help him moved the samurai's heart that he actually sniffled a little. He was feeling so grateful that he could cry at this moment. I, Kinemon, will surely repay your kindness one day, young lady. If there is anything that I can help you with, please do not hesitate to come and look for me. Neru smiled and didn't respond to his words. She took the head carefully and said, all right, let's get you out of here. She then carried the head out of the room and continued to roam the whole floor. Once again, she didn't forget to disable all of the surveillance snails that they have encountered along the way. Kinemon had watched carefully how she merely flicked her finger in the direction of those snails and knocked them out, and for the moment, he could feel a faint sense of Ryo from her small attack, which caused him to furrow his eyebrows in slight confusion. That was very impressive, Naruto, he commented. His way of calling her had changed to a more respectful manner since she was now considered to be his benefactor. Knowing that he would not change the way he addressed her, she didn't comment on that and merely thanked him for the compliment. It wasn't much. She merely shot a harmless wind-based needle shot to the snail's pressure point to knock them unconscious. If you don't mind me asking, Naruto, what exactly is your profession? Kinemon asked politely, not wanting to sound rude. Ever since she claimed to have come from this land of Yuzu, and the way she had dressed herself, his curiosity of this country had grown as moments passed by. Neru was silent for a while, before she said, a ninja. Honestly, she could hardly call herself a proper ninja these days. If it weren't for the jutsus in her arsenal, she couldn't even be called a ninja anymore. Especially if one looked at her current lifestyle. Other than dealing with the troublesome political issues between her country and other countries, her current life could be said to be quite idle and peaceful. Nobody dared to pick a fight with her due to her reputation and terrifying powers. Even the Marines or anyone from the world government had refrained themselves from making trouble after what she had done to the Mary Geos. With no conflict for her to resolve, she had no opportunity to properly use her profession as a ninja. These days, she was just playing the role of an idle leader of a kingdom in peace. So there are many ninjas in your country as well? Kinemon had also wanted to ask if they also had samurais and yuzu while trying to look at her who was at the back of his head. But since he had no neck at the moment, it was just his eyes moving left and right trying to have a glimpse of her. He failed, of course. No, there is only me, she stated. In Yuzu, we have no ninjas or samurais. The country itself has just come into existence 8 years ago. Besides his curiosity of this Yuzu, he was also curious of his benefactor's identity and background. Why was a young lady who claimed to be from a newly established country actually had a faint sense of Ryo coming from her? He had many questions that he wanted to ask, but at the same time, he was worried about offending her. However, there was one thing that made him more curious over anything else. Naruto, earlier, you said that you have been to Wano before. Kinemon was hesitant to say more, but he eventually finished his sentence with a careful tone. How? What is your judgment of the current Wano? Although she noticed his hesitation and the way he changed the structure of his question, Neru didn't think of it too much. Since Kinemon was a person of that land, she was sure that he knew and understood exactly the condition of his own country better than her, an outsider, did. He might just be curious about what an outsider thought of his country. So she gave her honest thought. Not so good. Then, she heard the samurai gritted his teeth. He was angry, she noted. For a brief moment, she was worried that her opinion was offensive to him. But something was telling her that his anger was not directed at her. Perhaps he knew it himself what kind of condition his country was in, and found it difficult for him to accept the reality. She waited for the samurai to say something, but after a few moments passed, the man still hadn't made any sound. She naturally took it as him not wanting to continue their topic. Instead, she swiftly changed the subject of discussion to his missing son. She asked how old he was and what he looked like, etc. Kinemon didn't comment on the sudden change of topic and just answered her harmless questions truthfully. Soon, the duo's conversation was cut off when they heard sudden noises coming ahead of them. Their expressions turned serious, but they remained calm. Neru knew that these people would not pose any threat to her, so it would be fine even if they ended up stumbling upon each other, as she could just knock them out before they could do anything. Suddenly, confusion came to her when she detected 4 familiar presences that shouldn't be here, among those people. Without making any sound, she walked towards the end of the wall. She peeked at the corner, and her face instantly turned dark at what she saw. What are they doing here? She muttered quietly under her breath, but was still loud enough for Kinemon to hear. Curious, he tried to extend his necklace head to have a look, and barely managed to catch a glimpse of a group of people wearing strange yellow attire that covered them from head to toe, hiding their appearance. He recognized these people to be the same as those who had thrown his head into the room he was earlier. Some of them were carrying 3 unconscious people and a furry animal with a strange blue hat. Judging from the young lady's reaction, they should be acquainted with each other. Kinemon was right. She indeed knew those people. Those unconscious people that were currently being carried over by, presumably, Caesar's men, were none other than Nami, Sanji, Frankie and Chopper. They actually got kidnapped to this side of the island in just a short time. Even though her time with them was not considered to be long, she still understood their characters and knew that they were capable people of their own. But seeing 4 of Luffy's friends in this state, she didn't waste any time and immediately took action. With Kinemon in her left hand, she managed to blend in between the people and knock them unconscious with a quick, direct, and swift attack. These unfortunate people didn't even know what hit them before they all fell down unconscious one by one. The moment they fell to the floor, the 4 straw hats were also dropped, but Neru managed to grab a hold of Nami, who was the nearest to her, and save her from hitting her head on the floor. As for the other 3, they could deal with a little fall. "Are these people your friends, Naruto?" Kinemon asked. Admiration shone in his eyes after seeing how quick she dealt with the enemies. They belong to my little brother's crew." Hearing the word crew, the samurai's face suddenly showed a hostile expression. "Are these people pirates?" The sudden rising of anger and hatred that she sensed from the man startled her. Did he suffer a bad experience with pirates before? Nevertheless, she answered, "They are good people." "Naruto's friends are definitely good people," he responded after a short silence, deciding to trust the young lady's judgment. Even though the hatred and anger were still there, they were not as strong as earlier. At this, Neru was impressed at this ability to control his emotions. He had proven himself to be somewhat a rational person who didn't put every pirate under the label of bad pirates just because of his bad experiences with some bad pirates in the past. Regarding the 4 straw hats, it didn't take long for them to regain their consciousness as soon as Neru woke them up, with Sanji being the first person to notice her presence. "Neru-san? How come you're here?" he asked, then followed by the others. "What happened? Where are we? Who are these people?" Seeing how they were somewhat unfamiliar while being surrounded by strange people instead of being on the Thousand Sunny, Sanji immediately figured out that they must have been ambushed and knocked out with the sleeping gas, since he had seen the others lying unconscious on the deck, before he too, lost, was knocked out. His confusion as to why these bastards were knocked out was answered with Neru's appearance, who stood quietly next to Nami. "How are you guys feeling?" Neru asked. "Did you know that I'm in trouble, so you came to save me?" "Neru-san." Neru's sweat dropped when Sanji had noodle danced his way to his side with his hands clasped together over his chest. At the same time, a hint of contempt flashed across a certain samurai's eyes as he looked at Sanji. "This man resembles that of a pervert. Naruto, it is best if you can stay away from this man." "What did you say?" Sanji automatically responded as he glared at Kinemon, only for him to realize a second later that Neru was holding onto a big severed head that was looking back at him with contempt. "Gah! It's a talking head!" Chopper and Nami screamed together as they looked at Kinemon in fear and surprise. "Ah! The raccoon has just spoken!" Kinemon was also equally surprised upon seeing that the furry animal had just talked. "I'm not a raccoon, you bastard! I'm a reindeer! It's a talking animal!" While the others were screaming, only Frankie was calm as he lifted his sunglasses to take a good look at Kinemon and asked, "Where did you get this talking head, Neru-sis?" Neru, who was amused with the others' reactions, calmly introduced Kinemon and explained his own circumstances to them. Coupled with what she said and the samurai's own confirmation, they now understood that the distress call they received earlier was actually from one of Caesar's own men. As Neru had already told them about this place being an enemy's territory, Sanji and the others didn't dwell on the matter any longer. "Then, we must be in Caesar's place now," Nami said as she looked around warily. Neru nodded and added, while she had been here for a while now, she still hadn't managed to find Caesar Clown. Instead, she found Kinemon. The 4 looked at the severed head, and Sanji in particular could feel a rising jealousy within himself upon seeing how comfortable the samurai was for being held so carefully by a beauty like Neru-san. He was jealous, damn it! "It must be tiring, having to carry such a big head by yourself this entire time, Neru-san. So just leave this job to me." Before Neru or Kinemon could react, the head had already been snatched away by Sanji, who was holding the samurai by his top knot. "Release me this instant." "Shut up, you stupid head!" "Both you shut up!" screamed Nami as she punched both Sanji and Kinemon on top of their heads. "Why yes, Nami-san. To be hit by an indecent woman, my pride as a warrior has been wounded," Kinemon cried out, only to be hit by Nami once again. Only then did he become obedient. "Nami is scary," Chopper whimpered as he held onto Neru's pants, while Neru just sighed. Once everyone had calmed down, it was Sanji's turn to explain what had happened to them to Neru. As Sanji had expected, they had been ambushed by the enemies and were taken to this place. Thankfully, Neru was already there before something could happen to them. What about Brook then? Chopper asked with a concerned look. All of them were here, except for Brook, who was nowhere to be seen. These bastards probably assumed that Brook was truly dead, so they didn't take him with them, Sanji said. Besides the confused Kinemon, the rest exchanged looks with each other before they all nodded in agreement. That skeleton will surely be fine on his own, Frankie said, assuring the youngest so that he wouldn't have to worry. Now, what are we going to do? Nami asked, looking at Neru. If we stay here any longer, there might be other people coming after us soon. I have promised Kinemon-san that I will help him to look for his son, so I'll be staying here with him for the time being. Anyway, most of the surveillance snails in this building have already been disabled, so it will be fine if you guys want to leave this place with ease. No thank you. I think staying with you will be a better option. Nami then went to attach herself to the older woman by hugging her arm. In the younger woman's opinion, staying with Neru was always better than being on their own in an unfamiliar enemy's territory. Don't worry, Neru-san, Nami-swan. I will protect both of you from danger with my own life, Sanji declared confidently. Well, this is going to be super fun. Frankie grinned, while Chopper, who had already climbed upon his broad shoulder, cheered. Just like Nami, the reindeer also thought that with Neru the powerhouse with them, there was nothing for them to worry about. Naturally, Neru had no problem in letting them tag along. She only told them to lay low as long as they could so as to not attract the enemy's attention to themselves. They all agreed with her, and Nami then suggested moving the bodies from here and hiding them somewhere. What about there? Chopper pointed to a certain room that was a little bit far away from them. Upon closer look, there was a large sign above the door that stated Biscuit Room. Do you think they keep a lot of biscuits in there? Chopper asked, excited at the thought of eating some delicious biscuits. I'm a little bit hungry. Then, let's have a look first, Sanji said. Biscuit room? I don't know about that. It screams suspicious to me, commented Nami. Her guts were screaming at her that the room definitely had nothing to do with Biscuit whatsoever. Neru narrowed her eyes at the door and frowned slightly. There are people inside. Her words alarmed the others. Enemies? Nami asked worriedly. She knew it. I don't think so. With her saying that, the others naturally felt relieved. Neru had long sensed that there were many people inside that particular room, but their presence was not the same as those people from earlier. Theirs seemed more pure, like that reminded her of innocent children. Hence why she wasn't as wary as she should when she was in an enemy's territory. Without saying anything, she walked towards the room, followed by the others as they left behind the still unconscious people. Neru opened the door carefully, and was surprised to see a bunch of children of different sizes inside the large room. Children? The Straw Hats plus one samurai exclaimed in surprise. Look, there are many children in this place. My son must be here as well. Good children, is there a boy with the name of Momonosuke here? When the door was opened, and a group of adults came in, the children all stopped what they were doing and stared at these unfamiliar people with curiosity. However, seeing a head with no body suddenly start to scream at them, the children were scared and automatically retreated backwards in panic. Stop screaming! You're scaring them away! Nami yelled as she punched Kinemon on top of his head to stop him from scaring away the children. While Frankie closed the door, Neru placed a seal to prevent anyone from entering the room. The unconscious subordinates of Caesar were left in the hallway, and the sight would definitely alarm anyone that would stumble upon them. She then dealt with the surveillance snails in the room before they could notice her. But why are there children here? Asked Chopper. What else? They must have been kidnapped to this place as well, Kinemon claimed, causing the rest to frown. The samurai was also looking for his missing son that he had claimed to be taken here, so they didn't doubt his words about the possible kidnapping at all. Although the kids were afraid and wary of these strange people, they were more curious about them. Keeping a safe distance from the strangers, the children only stared at them with eyes full of curiosity. Having experience dealing with children since Ace was a baby, Neru stepped forward with a gentle smile and tried to assure the children that her group meant no harm. We are here to look for a boy. His name is Momonosuke, she said shortly, before sending a glance at Kinemon. Quickly, he described what Momonosuke was supposed to look like, staring at the children with hope that they could give him the answer he was desperate for. However, he was bound to be disappointed. The children exchanged a confused look with each other before they shook their heads. "I'm sorry, mister, but we have never seen a boy who looks like that in here," said one of the kids, who was a giant-sized girl with short dark hair and a pair of big auburn eyes. Kinemon looked dejected, but he didn't want to give up. "Then I am sure that he is being held somewhere else. Naruto, it seems that I have to trouble you for a while longer." "Don't worry, we'll find him," Neru assured him. "By the way, you kids, why are you here? Where are your parents?" It was Chopper who asked. The girls squealed when they saw the cute fluffy Chopper on top of the shoulder of a robot-like man who, at the same time, was idolized by the majority of the boys in the room, causing them to lower their guard and talk to them. "Because the master said that we are sick," one of the kids answered. "We haven't seen our parents ever since we were taken here." At the mention of the word parents, the other children started to show a sad expression. "I miss my parents so much. I want to go home. I want to see my mom." Listening to the children's cries, Neru and the rest frowned. There was no doubt anymore. These children were indeed kidnapped. The master that they were referring to must have been Caesar himself. "Despicable," Nami muttered under her breath. "What are we going to do now?" Chopper, the one with the softest heart, asked in concern. But before anyone could respond to his question, they heard noises from outside. Sanji signaled them to lower their voices just as someone tried to open the door from outside. Realizing that the door couldn't be opened, the person outside started to bang on the door harshly. "It's no use, the door is locked." All of the surveillance snails in this entire section B have collapsed, including those in the biscuit room. The intruders must be hiding inside. What about the children then? "Quick! Someone go and inform Master about this. This is bad. We have been discovered." Chopper panicked. "What should we do now?" Nami asked, staring at Neru. "Don't worry. Nobody will be able to enter this room without my permission," Neru said. However, for how long were they going to stay trapped in here? Neru and the others could just leave the room now, and they would still have enough time to leave this place before more people come. But Nami took a glance at the children, and her heart felt discomfort at the thought of leaving them here, especially after knowing that they were actually kidnapped. "We need to contact Luffy and the others," Sanji suddenly said. "We have to inform them of our situation first. Then let's call Brook first if he has already awakened. If he is truly left on the ship, then we can head over there first. Only then will we contact Luffy," Neru suggested. "If they leave this place, then they should at least have a clear objective of where to go and what to do. But we don't have Den Mushi with us right now. Those bastards must have taken them away when we were unconscious earlier," Sanji cursed. "Here, use mine first." Neru gave Sanji her own personal Den Mushi that she had taken from her storage seal. Being with her for these several days, the Straw Hats had long gotten used to the sight of some things appearing from out of nowhere around her. But for Kinemon, it just seemed like she had taken a snail from under her wide sleeve. Using Neru's personal Den Mushi, Sanji tried to call the Den Mushi in the Thousand Sunny, hoping that Brook would pick it up. After a few moments, the call was picked up. At the same time, at the Thousand Sunny, standing over the several unconscious bodies lying on the snowy deck, Brook sighed. He was just done dealing with these intruders, only to realize afterwards that he dealt with them so fast that they were knocked out before he could even question them about his missing friend. He had been surprised when he woke up to see some intruders rummaging through the ship with his friends were nowhere to be seen. On top of his friend's disappearance, he was also shocked when he noticed that the ship was now on the snowy land of Punk Hazard that Naru-san had gone off to earlier, instead of still being outside of the flaming sea waiting for Luffy-san and the others. "I hope Sanji-san and the others are fine," he said to himself. "Puru puru puru puru." Suddenly, a familiar ringing of the Den Mushi was heard coming from the galley. With his light bones, Brook jumped over to the second floor, entered the galley and picked up the call. Hello? Brook. He heard several familiar voices calling out his name. Then he heard Chopper's voice asking if he was all right. Yo-ho-ho-ho. I am well. With that being said, I was so worried when I didn't see any of you guys. Is everyone all right? We're good. Neru-san is also here with us, informed Sanji. Brook, you're on the ship now, right? Well, yes. Then where is the ship now? We're going to head over there now. Brook hummed as he picked up the den mushi and brought it outside. He then looked around the surroundings, before his gaze landed on the massive building right in front of him. I am not sure exactly where I am, but there is a massive building right in front of the ship. There is also a label that says PH006 on the other side of the wall. Will that help? This time, it was Neru who spoke. Then you're just outside of the building that we are in right now. Brook, wait for us. Back to Neru and the others. Well, you guys heard that. The Sunny should be right outside of this place, so it won't take long for us to reach the ship if we were to leave now, Neru said as everyone stared at her. Hearing the conversation between the strangers, the children who had been children observers this whole time suddenly decided to be brave and approach them on their own. Wait! One of the children walked closer to them and asked, Are you guys leaving this place? If you are leaving, then can you take me with you? Yeah, me too. We want to go outside too. Big brothers and big sisters, please take us with you too. We promise we will be obedient, and we are not sick anymore. Right. We are not sick anymore. We want to see our parents. Please. Neru, the Straw Hats, and Kinemon stared at each other and shared a tacit understanding. Now that they knew that these children were kidnapped, it wouldn't sit well with them if they left without helping them. Naturally, they decided to help them. Then, Neru-san, what should we do now? Trying to leave this place in such a large group will definitely attract more attention from those bastards. You don't have to worry about it. As long as I am here, I will never let anything happen to any of you. Her words certainly assured Nami and the rest as one thing they could not doubt about her was her strength. Neru continued. Listen, besides those people outside, there shouldn't be more people in this building unless they have already called for more backups. I have already dealt with the surveillance snails earlier, so we won't have any problem if we want to leave with everyone in this room. Our obstacle is only the enemies outside. Sanji, Frankie and Chopper, I believe that the three of you can handle them just fine, right? The three people that she mentioned grinned at her. You can count on us, Neru-san. This is super easy. You can all leave them to me. TCH, if I have my sword and a complete body, I can handle those people easily. Just shut up and let us do the job, you damn samurai. Why you? While the guys were interacting just fine, a little girl who was the closest to Nami suddenly asked, Big sis, are you taking us with you? In response, Nami gave her a comforting smile and said, If you guys want to leave with us, then be sure to be good and listen carefully. The faces of the children instantly brightened up with joy. Thank you, big sis and big brothers. All right, everyone, prepare yourself. We are leaving now, informed Neru as she removed the barrier surrounding the room. With the barrier being gone, Frankie blasted open the door with his radical beam, which amused the boys. So cool! Chopper and the little boys cheered with stars in their eyes as they stared at Frankie. Warg! What kind of witchcraft is that? Even Kinemon couldn't help but to feel impressed by the sight before him. Meanwhile, outside, the exploded door caught the people off guard. The intruders! One of them pointed at the gang. Attack! Sanji yelled and they started to deal with the enemies. The enemies panicked when they were suddenly attacked. Some of them were kicked in the head by a person who was holding onto a screaming head with no body. Some were being pushed away roughly by a big fat furry creatures that could do martial arts movements. And not to mention a robot-like man that was shooting at them with some kind of a laser beam from his fingertips. The fight was obviously one-sided with Sanji's group having the upper hand. Within less than a minute, there were many people in yellow suits who ended up on the floor while groaning in pain. Neru-san, we are done here. It's time to leave now, Sanji waved at Nami, who was standing protectively in front of the children with Nami slightly behind her. Neru nodded at him. She then turned to look at the children and said in a stern but gentle voice, "Remember, stay close to us and don't separate from one another." "Yes, big sis." Satisfied with their response, Neru started to lead everyone all the way to the exit. Just as she expected, there was nobody around to get in their way, so it didn't take long for them to reach the main entrance of the building. The moment they saw a big metallic door, Chopper, still in his kung fu point, stepped forward and pushed open the door with his palm, letting out a battle cry as he did so. As soon as they went through the door, everyone except for Neru and Chopper couldn't help but to shiver when they were greeted by the strong cold breeze of air blowing in their direction. "Cold!" Nami exclaimed, shivering as she wrapped her arms around herself. Though they were cold, the children were much happier about finally being able to leave the facility. "Yay! We are finally out! We can go home! I can finally see my parents again!" The children were shivering, but it seemed that the cold didn't even bother them as they cheered with a joyous mood while looking around the showy land with their sparkling eyes. Seeing their happiness, the adults wondered how long had they been kept here ever since they were forcibly taken away from their respective family? Looking at their pure and innocent reaction, Neru and the others were glad that they stumbled upon these children. "All right, it's best if we can reach the ship as soon as possible, so we have to leave now. This place is too cold and too risky for us to stay here any longer," Neru said. Nami was concerned about the children. "What about these kids? Will they be fine walking in the snow like this?" At her words, the others looked at the shivering children and were also worried if they wouldn't be able to handle the harsh cold until they reached the ship. Not to mention warm clothes, they didn't even have shoes on. When the adults were staring at them, the children thought that they wouldn't take them along because of how much of a burden they could be to them. In a hurry, one of the giant kids stepped forward with an anxious look. "It's okay. Us, the big kids, can carry the small ones, so please don't abandon us here," the girl, Mocha, said timidly. Another kid her size, a boy with blonde hair, nodded furiously next to her. "Mocha is right. We promise that we won't be a burden," he said. Following Mocha and the boy, the other big-sized children also expressed their desperation by saying that they were willing to carry their small friends so that the adults wouldn't have to worry about them. Neru and the others felt heartache for them. How badly had they been treated here that they wanted to escape from this place that bad? Even Sanji and Kinemon felt pity and uncomfortable seeing the kids acting like this, with the latter feeling more anxious and worried for his missing son, wondering what kind of unimaginable suffering that the poor boy had to endure in this kind of place. Nami and Chopper had tears in their eyes while Frankie was already crying. At the moment, someone said, "I can help everyone." Everyone glanced at Kinemon. "You?" Sanji gave him a doubtful look. His doubt was not without a reason. After all, the samurai didn't even have a body at the moment. What could he do to help everyone in this situation if he didn't even have a body? Sensing the dubiousness from everyone around him, Kinemon snorted. He lifted up his chin proudly and said, "Don't underestimate me. You haven't even seen what I, Kinemon, am capable of yet. You quickly go and pick some rocks for me." A tick appeared on Sanji's forehead when the samurai brazenly demanded him to do something as stupid as picking rocks at this time. "Stop fooling around, you damn samurai! I am being truthful. I can help. So stop being stubborn and go pick some rocks for everyone." "How can picking rocks be of any help for us right now?" "I'm telling you, it can." "Arg. Fine." Passing the head over to a stunned Chopper, Sanji reluctantly went over to a nearest big boulder that was heavily covered by a thick layer of snow. He raised his leg high up in the air, in which it was later covered with blazing flame. With one powerful swing of his leg, the boulder was then destroyed into hundreds of tiny rocks. He let down his leg, and proceeded to pick up a bunch of them and carried them over to everyone. Glaring at the grinning Kinemon, he dropped rocks in the middle. "Here. Happy now? Good. Good. Don't mind me asking, but what exactly are you going to do with these many rocks, Kinemon-san?" Neru asked kindly. "I'll change them into some warm clothes." Huh! Facing everyone's baffled look, Kinemon huffed. Just wait and see. Naruto, please put one rock on top of your head. What tricks are you playing right now, you fool? We have no time to play around. Sanji yelled at him, but Neru just listened to Kinemon's instructions and really placed a small rock on top of her head. Like this? She asked. Instead of answering, Kinemon decided to show everyone what he could do. As if it was magic, a piece of cloth suddenly came into existence before everyone. Neru was startled when she was suddenly wearing a long purple coat that had fur around its collar and sleeves that reached her knees. Because it was unzipped, her original clothes could still be seen underneath the coat. Wow! The rock just turned into a coat! Exclaimed in amazed Chopper. What a super ability! Come! Everyone, please put a rock on top of your head and I will change them into a warm cloth for you. Kinemon seemed proud as he peered at Sanji with a provoking gaze as if he was trying to say, Hey, you believe me now? Though he was annoyed, Sanji didn't bother to fight with him. Instead, he just waved his hand dismissively at him and responded casually. Fine, fine. You're doing great. The next moment, everyone was wearing a warm outfit identical to the one that Neru was wearing, completed with a pair of warm boots. Only, the children were wearing light yellow coats while the straw hats were wearing black coats. Thank you? The children thanked Kinemon gratefully. This is really warm, and I like the coat as well, said Nami as she checked herself out. That is an interesting ability you have there, Kinemon-san. Neru complimented him. Knowing that there were ninjas in Wano as well, she wasn't surprised that Kinemon was able to perform a jutsu. In fact, she was more impressed that someone was actually able to cast a jutsu without any hand sign. She didn't even feel any flow of energy coming from him. How did you even do that? Chopper asked. Satisfied by the compliments and positive responses from everyone, Kinemon let out a laugh before he began to answer Chopper's question. The truth is, I once ate a very weird fruit with an awful taste. Ever since that day, I am able to use a jutsu even though I am not a ninja. With this power, I can disguise myself and other people. I don't know much about the foreign clothes, but I have seen some of the people here wearing this kind of clothing to keep them warm. But I warn you, the clothes will disappear once you take them off or once they receive too much damage. So you're a devil fruit user? Sanji stated. Neru gained an understanding. It turned out that Kinemon didn't actually use a real jutsu, but instead he just used his devil fruit's ability and mistook it as the natural ability to perform a jutsu used by the ninjas in Wano. Alright then, it's time to start moving. As soon as she said that, the group started to move. Since the place described by Brook was not that far, Neru led everyone and walked alongside the wall of the building. Neru, Nami and Chopper, who was holding on to Kinemon, were walking at the front, while Sanji and Frankie were at the back to guard them. Because the snow was falling down so heavily, their track was soon covered, leaving no trace of them. Not soon after that, Neru started to feel a familiar presence. Smiling, she informed the rest, "We are almost there. I can feel Brook's presence." That's great. Nami was delighted. She couldn't wait to soak her body in hot water. Actually, it wouldn't take long for them to reach the Thousand Sunnies since that place was just around the corner. But since they had children with them, and because of the thick layer of snow on the ground, it still took them quite a while for them to arrive. When they arrived, they finally managed to see a small harbor with 3 ships currently docked there. Besides the Thousand Sunny, they didn't recognize the other 2 ships, but they most likely belonged to the enemies. In front of the ship, there was the familiar figure of Brook, who was in the middle of building a snowman, even though there were already several of them around him. It seemed that the Soul King had no better thing to do while waiting for them. "Oi, Brook!" Chopper immediately called out to him. A living skeleton? Kinemon was surprised and horrified when he saw Brook. He didn't expect that the friend they were talking about was a dead man with nothing but bones. Before he could voice out his doubts and curiosity of Brook's unnatural existence, he suddenly noticed something. The thing that he saw was very familiar, and it was currently heading towards the unsuspecting Brook. Immediately, Kinemon turned to Neru. "Naruto, that? If Kinemon could notice something unusual, how could she not? Kinemon didn't even manage to finish his words when Neru disappeared from her spot, surprising Nami, who was standing next to her with her sudden disappearance. Eh? Where did she go? Over there. At Chopper's loud voice, everyone's attention then fixed on the sight of Neru, who had suddenly appeared in front of Brook. The Soul King was so shocked that he screamed and fell backwards. What surprised everyone the most was not the fact that she just disappeared and reappeared in just a blink, but it was because she was now holding on to something short and sharp as she blocked the incoming sword that was originally heading towards Brook. And the owner of the sword was surprisingly no more than just a body with no head and no legs. Eek! A body with no head and legs? Don't tell me. There is no mistake. That is indeed my body, Kinemon exclaimed with a wide smile on his face. What happened? Why did you guys stop? Asked Sanji, who had just arrived with Frankie following closely behind him. They were confused when the people at the front suddenly stopped moving. Worried, they immediately came to the front. Kinemon found his body, answered Nami. On Neru's side, perhaps because the body had sensed Kinemon, or because Kinemon had recognized his body, thus was now controlling it, but the body had now stopped resisting and retreated a few steps away from Neru, who realized that it was not an enemy, but in fact, was just the missing body of the samurai. Na Neru-san. What is that? A headless ghost? Neru relaxed her stance and stored away her kunai, before she turned around and looked at the panicking Brook on the snowy ground. She realized that they never did mention anything about Kinemon to Brook during their call earlier. Hence, why Brook was so shocked to see a moving body with no head and limbs. It was also a mystery why the body would start to attack Brook for no reason. Perhaps because it didn't have any sense to see and hear, thus it just attacked anything by instinct. Just then, they heard the familiar voice of Chopper calling out to them. Guys! The reindeer waved his arm at them. Behind him was the rest of the group, with Sanji holding on to Kinemon's top knot. Though Brook was happy and relieved to see his friends, he was more surprised to see Sanji with a severed head with him. Sanji-san. Why are you carrying a head with you? Whose head is that? As he was already informed about the children, Brook wasn't surprised to see Mocha and the rest. He was just a little bit taken aback to see some of the giant children, but he still welcomed them with a warm greeting. Although some of them did tear up a bit when a tall living skeleton suddenly approached them. Thankfully, there were Nami and Chopper to calm the kids. My body! Kinemon cried out in joy upon seeing his body that had already made its way towards its separated head. After the head and body had joined together, Kinemon quickly expressed his thankfulness towards Neru and the others, more so to Neru. After all, if it wasn't for their fated encounter and her kindness to help him, he wouldn't even have the ability to escape from his cell. Alright everyone, get on board the Sunny. It will be super warmer up there. Frankie spoke as he struck a pose. To the ship. To the ship. The kids chorused after him. Sanji-kun, can I trouble you to prepare some warm meals while I take a hot shower? Anything for you, Nami Swan. Sanji replied with his hands clasped together, and a big heart in his eyes. Only after had gone to her room did he snap out of his trance before he made his way to the galley. While Sanji was busy in the kitchen, Frankie and Chopper took care of the children by letting the smaller ones rest inside the aquarium bar. Due to the size of some of the children, they couldn't enter any of the rooms. Instead, they just stayed outside, sitting together in a circle. Even so, they were quite happy to be there while waiting for the mister with a swirly eyebrow to finish cooking. As for Neru, seeing that the others were doing just fine, she was about to go and change out of her wet clothes due to the melted snow, only to stop on her track when she caught a glimpse of Kinemon standing near the railing as he looked at the facility with a grim and worried expression on his face. Thinking for a while, she then decided to approach him. Later, I will have to return back inside since I still need to search for a certain man, she said as she stood next to him. Even without his legs, Kinemon still managed to reach the height of her shoulder. If he were to have his legs now, wouldn't he be as tall as Brook? Perhaps, he might be even taller than the Soul King himself. She continued, would you like to follow me? We can search for your son in the meantime. That is a definite Naruto. How could my heart be at ease if my boy is still inside, probably suffering injustice while here? I am fine. If something were to happen to him, then I won't even hesitate to pierce a sword to my chest. Neru didn't show any hint of disapproval over his words. She just nodded in understanding since she herself was a parent to a little girl. When Tama's face showed up in her head, Neru couldn't help but to wonder whether she had eaten her meals, had she been sleeping well, or did she even miss her mother? Due to her busy work, Neru hadn't returned to Yuzu for many weeks ever since she had left on her mission to Fishman Island. She decided that after she settled the matter in Dressrosa, she would definitely return back home. Of course, with Luffy and his crew as well. It seemed that Luffy still didn't know that he had a niece. I have a daughter too, so I completely understand how you feel as a parent. Kinemon stared at her with wide eyes and a gaping mouth at her sudden revelation that she actually had a kid. Realizing that his reaction was rude, he immediately fixed his expression. My apologies. May I know how old she is? She should be around 7 by now. Also, Tama is actually my adopted daughter. I found her in Kuri when she was still a baby. It was just a pure fateful encounter, but I met Tama's real mother, and she gave her baby to a stranger like me before she passed away right in front of me. Kinemon was startled upon hearing her words. Not knowing the turmoil in the samurai's heart, Neru continued. I don't know how Wano is doing right now, but the places that I visited back then were really terrible. A lot of people were abandoned by your government, forced to do labor works, and were even starved to death. Starving to death, that was exactly how Tama's mother died. I'm afraid if I didn't take Tama away from that place, she would have been dead due to starvation a long time ago. With displeasure displayed all over her face, Neru said to the samurai, Kinemon-san, as an outsider, I might not have the position to say anything about your government, but I really hope that Wano has changed its ruler in these past few years. Just based on what I saw 7 years ago, Kurama Orochi is truly not suitable to be the shogun of Wano. Once she finished her sentence, the wooden railing underneath the man's palms were broken into pieces as he gritted his teeth so hard, while releasing a terrifying aura that caused those who were nearby to be startled. Kurama Orochi.